Okay, hello. That was the most interesting selfie I've ever taken, and I've taken a lot of selfies. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here in Lisbon at Diving Talks with all of you. Today, I want to share with you literally one of the coolest expeditions I've ever planned. Literally the coolest. In 2021, I planned to shoot with Seiko to go ice diving inside of a glacier. And it turned out to be one of the most unique and dynamic environments that I've personally ever gone diving in. Let's see. Oh. Oh, there we go. Those of you who know some of my work, I love shipwrecks, I love caves, I love sharks. I do a lot of extreme underwater environments, but one of the most extreme environments I dive in is diving in ice, and I'm going to go into that a little bit, some of the reasons why. But I didn't just jump into diving inside of a glacier. Oh. Okay, this is quick. I didn't just jump into diving inside of a glacier. I cut my teeth basically starting out as a cave diver in Florida. I've been diving for 29 years, and I started cavern diving when I was 14, because, hey, that's a normal thing for a 14-year-old to do, right? But I lived in Florida, the springs were there, they were beautiful, and I saw those signs saying, stop, prevent your death, go no further. So I'm like, all right, I did what any normal 14-year-old would do. I went and signed up for a cavern class, and thankfully, YMCA actually taught people at 14, which is kind of crazy. But getting into cave diving was incredible, learning in Florida, Bahamas, Mexico, and I also started shooting in the dark. Like my first underwater photos, I actually took my camera into caves, and I was learning how to shoot in the dark, learning how to shoot film as well, so it was quite challenging. But I loved the planning, and I liked the technical diving environments. So that kind of transitioned many, many years later when I started doing more wreck diving all over the world, specifically now more in the Great Lakes where it's colder and you don't have as much time on these shipwrecks because even though I've done much deeper dives, because of the cold, I learned that the gear and the equipment and the planning involved, everything has to go a lot faster when you only have 25 or 30 minutes to get a shot, and also making sure that your dry suit is dry, because if you have a small leak in Florida in a cave, okay, it's not that big of a deal, but if you have a small leak in 3 or 4 degree water, it's a much bigger deal. So doing a lot of preparation, planning, workup dives before doing deeper shipwrecks was something that was really important. So a natural transition was getting into ice diving. I did an ice diver course in New York in a quarry, and then shortly after that, my husband and I got hired to shoot Bering Sea Gold under the ice in Alaska. It's a reality show for Discovery Channel, and we spent a month in Alaska diving under 2 meters of ice in the Bering Sea in April, and it was cold. It was -2 degree water. I had no heat. It was certainly a learning curve, and I was scared the whole time. I fully admit it was terrifying diving, but it did kind of give me this little kickstart to like, oh, ice. This is a really interesting, challenging environment. I do like this, and now at this point in my life, I spend about 6 weeks a year in Antarctica, and I spend at least 2 to 3 weeks a year in the Arctic as well. So I have really fallen in love with polar environments because they are challenging and they are unique places to shoot. Like I just got back from the Arctic, and it's taken me about 10 years and 7 trips to get photographs of walrus. But I finally accomplished them last month on a trip to the Arctic. So sometimes persistence really does pay off. And this was a leopard seal shot from Antarctica. And I just threw these in here to show that there's so many unique things to see, not just the ice itself, but unique wildlife to shoot in polar environments. So the question I get asked a lot, are there any ice divers in here? Do people dive ice? Oh, okay, a couple. Nice. All right, well, I get asked a lot, why ice diving? Like, what's the draw? I already kind of touched on one subject. It's challenging, and I like the challenge. I mean, you're in bulky gear, it's cold, you don't have a lot of time, your hands are kind of frozen. Operating the camera is much more difficult, but it is challenging. But to me, there's nothing more amazing than like diving on an iceberg when the sun is out, because it just sparkles. The ice just sparkles like diamonds, and it's truly beautiful. And I love running my hand down the side of the ice as I descend. It's just like silky and cool, and it's just it's a unique environment because you'll never dive the same iceberg twice. They're constantly melting, pieces are breaking off, the icebergs are flipping, so you can never photograph or dive that same iceberg again. So that's pretty unique. So there's different kinds of ice. There's icebergs. Oh geez, whoa, this thing's going crazy. Can you go back like 2 slides? Could you go back like 3 slides? There's a lot of different kinds of ice. When I first got into ice diving, I thought that, go back another 2, please. 1 more. When I first got into ice diving, I thought that, 1 more. I thought it was just flat ice that you would go out with your chainsaw and cut a hole, but that's not the only type of ice. There's icebergs, there's pack ice. You're killing me. There's pack ice where you'll see polar bears. You've got brash ice. That's the type of ice you'll see. Did you see it? That's the type of ice you'll see leopard seals in. And so there's all these different kinds of icy environments. Ice diving isn't just one thing. So I started my relationship with Seiko in 2020, and they wanted me to go to Antarctica and shoot a new line of ice diver watches for them. But unfortunately, the pandemic hit. We couldn't get to Antarctica. I was personally very depressed for a while because I'm like, here it is. I know if I could get there, I could get the most amazing images of these watches in Antarctica. And so I called him back like a couple months later, and I said, you know what? We can't go anywhere. So why don't we go to the Great Lakes? They freeze over in January and February, and I can get ice images for you in the Great Lakes. And they said, okay, let's do it. So off we went to the Great Lakes, and we had an incredible shoot there. And at the end of that shoot, they informed me that they were coming out with a second line, or a generation 2 of ice diver watches, and they needed another ice diving location that same year. So we did this in February 2021, and so then I started looking into Greenland, and that fell through about 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave. So I was back to my drawing board going, all right, well, where can we shoot ice? So I thought about my time in the Bering Sea in Alaska, except that was really terrible visibility. And I knew that icebergs in Alaska probably weren't going to be the right choice of diving. So again, I started doing more research. Icebergs weren't the right choice because where glaciers terminate, that's where the icebergs basically come off, and there's all this glacial flour in the water. It's not very good visibility, so not the right place. But I thought, well, can we go further in? Like, can we go dive like, these pools that I've seen in some photos from helicopters? These are called moulins, and basically a moulin is a very, very, very big crack that goes all the way down to the bedrock of the glacier. And in the summertime, the meltwater fills up these cracks, and it creates these gorgeous pools. And I looked at these and went, this is stunning. I mean, it's not very deep, but it's clear water. It's got a beautiful background. Can we dive this? So I called up some friends in Alaska, and I said, hey, I'm looking at doing a shoot in these moulins. What do you think? Like, I've never seen any divers in there. And they kind of laughed at me, and they're like, Becky, nobody dives those. Like, so when the glacier moves, on the bedrock, it can just flush all the water out like you're flushing a toilet. So it can suck all the water down underneath the glacier. And so I thought to myself, well, that's a creative way to go, at least. And then, Gareth, please cover your ears. Then they said, well, we wouldn't normally do this, but like, since it's you, we can go. Like, okay, yeah, that's a great reason. So we did put a lot of time and effort into planning and safety. We had countless meetings for months, and we decided that doing it during, well, it wasn't even really a possibility to do it during the summer because this was coming together last minute, but we decided to go in the winter time when everything would actually be frozen over. So those crystal clear pools that you just saw would actually freeze over, and nobody's ever done this before, so we didn't really know what to expect. We got out there, and I was expecting 0-degree air temperatures, and unfortunately it was negative 27 Celsius, which was the coldest I've personally ever dived in, and it definitely played havoc on our gear. Well, one of the first things we did when we landed is we took the helicopters out and we explored some moulins that had already been drained. So this kind of gave us an idea of what we might expect to see underwater. And it was really interesting to rappel down inside of some of these moulins, maybe 20 meters or so, and then go inside of them. You'd hear like breaking, it sounded like breaking glass, but it was like the glacier still moving and then pieces breaking off. But we'd see amazing formations that reminded me of what caves in Mexico and the Bahamas looked like ice stalactites and really incredible formations. So after we got an idea of what these moulins would look like underwater, we scouted a couple areas that our pilot had been watching for years, and he's like, you know what, these 3 or 4 pools, they haven't drained for years, they've been okay, so why don't we go and check these out? We had 8 people, one Robinson helicopter, we had 8 people and about 800 pounds of gear. It was challenging trying to think about what kind of gear can we bring out there. It would basically take us 4 trips out and 4 trips back to bring all of the people, camera, gear out with us. And you know it's an expedition when you're flying in a helicopter with an auger in between your legs. That's pretty cool, right? So we'd get out onto the ice. We kind of find our location, so that's where these little spots over here, those are our first group that landed on the glacier. And this area would actually, in the summertime, normally have a waterfall, and all of this would be open. So since we didn't know how thick the ice was, the helicopter landed very lightly and just like hovered there, and we'd get out, we'd do a quick auger hole to check the depth of the ice, thickness of the ice to make sure it was going to be okay, which it was. They had to run the helicopter about every 15 minutes to keep the engines warm, so it would continue to work. We'd get everything out of the helicopter, and then we had to really move with purpose at this point, because anybody who spent time out on the ice in a dry suit, like we came out fully kitted up in our dry suits, ready to go. We had a team. I had a surface support team, a dive safety officer, and a helper to help cut the hole. We had a topside camera team, a behind-the-scenes cameraman, myself, and a safety diver. But we had to move with purpose because it's very cold standing out there for a long period of time on the ice. So we'd cut our hole, check the depth of the ice, start getting geared up, and we basically wore these harnesses and had about 100 meters of rope, and we secured the rope onto the ice with ice screws. That way, if the moulin decided to drain at some point, which we were always looking for like current or something moving, then we had a whole safety plan theory in place. Luckily, we didn't have to use it. We did decide to use double steel 50s. I don't know what that is in liters, but small tanks obviously for redundancy. And basically, open circuit was sort of the easy way to go because we were only diving about less than 10 meters deep out here. So we gear up on the ice. Here I am suited up, waiting for my buddies to get in the hole. One thing that was really important on these dives for me as well, especially in the water temperatures that were 0 degrees, air temperatures negative 27, I was using my Santee Flex 2.0 heated undergarment, and it's probably one of the only reasons we could spend an hour and a half in the water and stay comfortable at the same time. So that was really great. Because they were certainly long dives, because we never knew if this was going to be our only dive. And to me, you plan every dive like it could be your only dive in that location. You don't know what's going to happen. So here's a good one. I get in the water, and I did something I normally do on every single dive. You probably do it too. I got in the water, I dipped my mask to get the defog out of it, and I picked my head up, and it flash froze. And I'm like, oh, well, that's unfortunate. I had a good laugh because that's never happened to me before. And then I descended down inside the glacier, and I'm like, oh, I'm finally here. I can't see anything. And it took me about 5 minutes just scraping away at the mask before I could finally get all of the ice to come off of the mask. When I first descended, yeah, I won't lie, it was hard on gear. Gear wasn't working very well. I couldn't put any air into the dry suit. I couldn't dump any air out of the wing. Thankfully, I had the pull dump, so that worked. Heating was working, but just the cold air temperatures froze everything pretty instantly. Once we descended down inside the glacier, it really reminded me of a cave, except just this beautiful, white, icy cathedral. And even though there was quite a bit of snow on the surface, because it was so white, it just reflected the light throughout the vast area that we were exploring. So it was really, really beautiful. Kind of ran my hands down the side of it. It's very slippery, very cool feeling. And so then my buddies got into the water. You can actually see one of our safety divers standing up at the top in the hole there. And we just started to swim around and explore a bit. These went back further than 300 or further than our 100-meter ropes could bring us. So we only went basically as far as the ropes could take us. And sometimes we went into these like ice tunnels, and it reminded me of the topside ones that we had seen. So they were really quite beautiful. I fully admit I was scared the entire time. We did 4 dives. This was the first dive, which could have been our only dive, because on our second dive of the trip, I was the only one to get down, and I spent an hour by myself just hanging out there with my camera, waiting for my 2 buddies to get down. But both of them had free flows in both their regulators, and we had these spare tanks, which also had free flows. So I spent an hour just kind of hanging out by myself doing ice selfies and waiting for them to come down. But it was truly a beautiful environment, and I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't dived in a glacier before, and again, I didn't even know that this could be a thing. These could have been completely frozen solid, no water left in them. The ice moves, and it kind of as the glacier moves, it can form these cracks, and you can see the cracks really, really well. And here's a good one. So these are some of the cracks from when the glacier moves. Piece of ice cracks, and then it refills in with fresh water and refreezes. So it's really quite beautiful. Kind of like dangerous beauty, if you want to put it that way. Dangerously beautiful. So yeah, we got our shots. We did about 4 dives. Every time we surfaced, we were just completely covered in ice, and the second you surfaced, your mask would freeze over, my camera would be completely covered in ice. I couldn't turn the lights on and off. Thankfully, I had things turned off when I surfaced, because the lights on the switches froze shut, the camera completely covered in ice. If I didn't have the arms already closed up, those were already frozen in whatever position they were frozen in. This was also a new experience for me. When we surfaced, the hood was slowly, you could hear it cracking and freezing to your head, so I had to quickly get the hood off. Everything was frozen. My dry suit zipper was frozen, completely iced over, and then my smart glove system was frozen to the dry suit. The Seiko watch I was shooting was also frozen to the dry suit. Everything was completely frozen solid. My D850, that one took a little bit of a beating. It still worked after this, but it was extremely cold. One of our cameramen who was using a red got some frostbite on his face just from touching the camera up to his face in the cold temperatures. It took about an hour or more for my camera to defrost once we got it back to the room, just because, you can see how it's encased. Even the lights are encased in ice. My O-rings shrunk a bit, so I had a bit of water inside of the camera. The cold really played havoc on our gear. As many of you know, you can't accomplish these types of dives on your own. You have to have a team. There was 8 of us, but our dive team is pictured here. Jeff Lindsay was my behind-the-scenes photographer. He spoke here at the first diving talks. And then Rick Witter was my safety diver and model in a lot of my images as well. And like I said, we had a topside dive safety officer, another topside support crew, and a camera team. If anyone's interested in seeing the video, if you just Google my name and Seiko, you'll see the glacial moulin video that we shot. So real quick to wrap this up, I know what you're all thinking. how do you get out of the dry suit when it's frozen solid like that? Well, you get out of the water, you kind of crunch back into the helicopter, and then you fly back to the...
How's that feel?
You fly back to the cabin. Oh,
After
yeah.
0 degree.
And that's how you defrost everything. Felt really good. Actually, I think I'm still waiting to feel the feeling in my feet again, and that's been about 2 years now. In the end, I have to say that I'm proud to be a friend of the brand for Seiko, and I really connect with their motto, keep going forward, because everything was a struggle, and I could have given up, but instead I kept going forward. We found our ice dives in Lake Michigan. We found these amazing moulins in Alaska and dived inside of a glacier. And we finally did get back to Antarctica in early 2022. But I never would have found that diving inside of a glacier is an actual thing if I didn't have to think creatively. And it was certainly an adventure and probably one of the most interesting, dynamic, and probably dangerous environments that I've ever been in. So, thank you.